Hi, I'm Kathryn Costa from TrueNorthArts.com. This is video 5 in my Astrology 101 Art Journal series. The first 4 videos, and there are links to those below this video if you've missed them, focus in on getting to know those 12 zodiac signs. There are a lot of different aspects and qualities, and we map those out on the zodiac chart. This video, our focus is in on what the ancient astrologers called the ruling planets. We're going to take a look at the characteristics and the qualities of each of them. The first part of this video is a demo of how I work with my celestial bodies stencil to create a beautiful journal page for taking notes. Then the second part, I will share with you how those ancients associated the different planets with those signs, what are some of those connections, and what they mean for you. Couple of comments before we get started. For a complete list of all of the materials that I use and the supplies, look at the description below. I link you directly to Stencil World products and where you can buy my stencils, but also I'm going to be demonstrating watercolors, and if you're interested in exploring those products and buying them for yourself, you'll find those links below. I've also prepared a reference guide that lists all of the different symbols and some of the characteristics of each one of them. It's a great reference for working with these stencils so you can easily pair up which ones go with what. So there's a link for that to download below as well. This is an example of the journal pages that we will create today for taking some notes about each of the planets, and these are the stencils we're working with. The circle in the zodiac chart is sized so it will nicely fit the symbols of the planets. So we're going to use that part of that stencil. Trace that up. I'm using a pen, a black pen, but then I'm using a pencil for tracing the symbol. I'm starting with the sun. And you can see I'm not tracing all of the parts of it because I'm going to be connecting the bridge. That's a full circle. And as we know with stencils, we have these little gaps. The next thing that I'm doing is I'm writing the name of the planet. In fact, this isn't a planet. The sun is a luminary. And then I am drawing a box and outlining it to go around it. Take that first stencil again, trace the circle using the pen, but then switching to a pencil to trace the glyph, and this one is for the moon. Write down the name, and then draw my little box, my little journaling box. You notice I'm not measuring anything. I'm not worried about having perfect lines or a little bit wonky. I like the character of things that are less than perfect. In fact, like way off. I just think it looks really cute. Here, this is Mercury. And then we'll move on to Venus. And Mars. Jupiter. Saturn. Uranus. Neptune. Pluto. The Earth. And Chiron. Now the next step is I'm going to use watercolors to color these in. This is a little Japanese set. Now there are links to these products in the description below if you're interested in picking them up. And then this is my favorite watercolor. The previous one that I just showed you, those are drier. They're not as luscious. I really like this set. So I got a bowl of salt and a bowl of clean water, paper towel, and a couple of round brushes. I end up in this demo, only using the really small one. Then you'll see I'm going to start with the sun, and I'm using this set because I really like the gold in it. I love all the colors, but for this particular project, I'm only going to use the gold in it. I'm getting that all wet. You can see I'm pushing. You can see the color lifting from that. And then I just run my brush along and color in, painting the outer edge of the symbol. Then I pulled out this set because I wanted to use the kind of more of a pearlized moon-like colors from it that I don't have in my other set. And here I'm using the technique like I did with the sun where it's wet on dry. So I'm painting on the page is a dry surface. You'll see in a moment that the rest of them, except for Chiron, I'm using the technique of wet on wet. And here I bring in a darker color because I want to create a moody effect. And you'll see how I kind of push the color around, just sort of attempting to create that effect of the glow of the moon and the night sky. Now moving down to Mercury, and I'm starting by applying fresh water with a brush on the surface to wet it. We're going to do a wet on wet technique here. And then I'm pulling up some, lifting up some of the paint, and you can see when I drop it in, it just floods the areas that are wet. And here I'm going in, I wanted to make a really dark, bright red, but then I realized, uh-oh, this is the wrong color. I was thinking I was working with Mars. So I take a paper towel, and I was so annoyed, but not too bad. I was just like, oh, teachable moment. Went back in with a wet brush to see if I could lift up some more of that color and let that dry and moved on to Venus. Now with Venus, I wanted to work with pink colors. She is the goddess of love and beauty and wanted to bring in that softness of, we get from that heart chakra. And then you'll see that I sprinkled some salt. Moving on to Mars. This is where I wanted that fiery red. Mars is the god of war, often referred to as the red planet. It's so close to the sun, so it's hot. With Jupiter, okay, here you see him doing that wet technique. In mythology, Jupiter is the sky god. To the Greeks, Jupiter was known as Zeus. So I reached for the colors of the sky. You can see I'm painting in some beautiful blues. And then sprinkling in some salt. Moving back to Mercury, let's see what we can do here. I started by wetting the surface, and I wanted to work with the colors of the throat chakra, which is blue, but also mixed with the heart chakra, which is green, because Mercury is the god of communication. So I thought communicating from the heart. So I'm using the seafoam green, and then I added this light blue, this sky blue, to mix it in just to see what I could do. Now, I really felt like this was a lost cause, and I was like, well, let's just see what happens here. You know, this was a total experiment to see if I could rescue this little spot on my journal page. You know, it happens. And as much as I've like wanted to start this video over and do it all right and perfect, I'm kind of glad this gives a teachable moment. It shows you what I do when I goof and how I try to recover. And let's see what happens with this. And so I'm covering up as much of that red as possible, sprinkle on some salt, and let it dry and see what happens. Now, while I was moving over to that, I brushed up against Mars, and you can see I goofed again. All right, you got to be careful when working with watercolors. Another teachable moment, things get messy. So I took my brush with some water on it, clean water, and I'm trying to like wash it up a bit. You have to be careful not to overwork it. So I added some water, brought out my paper towel, and just kind of tapped along to lift up some of that paint that I don't want. It happens. All right, so now when it all dries, you take your thumb and you rub up against it, and we're gonna move off that salt. Then I take my black pen and I'm coloring in all of the symbols. That's why I worked with pencil, because I didn't have to worry about, you know, how well things are. I knew I was gonna have some of the paint kind of bungle up the design. So as a finishing touch, I went in and added the the markings with this black pen. Now, the only symbol that I didn't color in black was the moon. I did outline it. I wanted that moon to have that glow that we are so familiar in the sky. You can see, just go in and add in that detail. My next step is to add color in between each of these journaling squares. You see I'm using that wet on wet technique again, where I wet a part of the page. You don't wet the whole thing. Just work in small sections as you go, and then drop in different colors. As you sit back and watch this part of the video, notice the different colors that I mix together. As I go, I start with wetting down the surface. Then I go in and add some color. And you'll notice this little channel of color that I created. And by tapping in colors, you can see it just, floods it. It's fun to experiment with bringing in different colors. Here, the red and the blue will mix and blend to create a violet color. It's really cool, and it's a lot of fun. And then I sprinkle with salt, which helps to further mix the colors. You can see I just work my way around. And here I'm going to use the color yellow to kind of convey the sun, the light of the sun, mixing in with some colors of Mercury. Have fun just playing around and see what color combinations you come up with. I'm throw in a little bit of that red. You can already see some of that violet forming. It's fun watching it in this fast pace, because you can really see how the ink just explodes in the pools of water. It's a lot of fun. Don't worry about what the outcome is. Just play. You see I move around the page. And while that page is drying, I moved over to the other side. Saturn was a earthy tones. Uranus was kind of trying to go for a two-tone blue effect. Neptune, I went with a violet and a blue. You see, I kind of mix a blue-violet kind of combination. Pluto, I went with a red-violet. Now, the type of salt that I use is just that ordinary table salt because it's very fine, small crystals. I've tried working with other size crystals of salt, and it doesn't create as cool of an effect. Then there's the earth using green tones. And with Chiron, I went back to that other palette, similar to the same one that I used for the moon. And this is wet on dry. And I thought that looked kind of light, so then I added, you'll see here in a bit, I added a bronzy color. There we go, there it is. And I give it a blush. Just layering up some different colors. And I did add salt to that one. Unlike the moon and the sun I did not add salt to. So then again, on this page, did the same thing as I did on the other one. I filled in lots of color in between all of those journaling squares, applying the salt. It's a very salty project. You know, you think glitter's messy. Well, the salt can get messy too, especially when you start rubbing it off. You can see to the right on the earth, it was still pretty wet and some of the green bled. Fortunately, with the type of design that I'm doing here, a little bit of that did not ruin the effect. So I ended up, I'm not going to show you the whole thing, the whole process, because you can get the gist. I filled up the entire page, and then once it's dried, rubbed off the salt, and then I went in with a marker to color in the little borders that define the journaling squares. And I just worked with coordinating colors. Yellow for the sun, gray for the moon. You are welcome to work with whatever colors you like. It is your journal page. There are no rules or expectations here. Here you can see how that page looks. Here's how the second page turned out. We are now ready for some note taking. Ha ha ha. Now, how fun is that? No boring notebooks with straight lines here. We're not alone in our fascination and curiosity about what we see up in the sky. And in fact, a study of the patterns is found in so many different cultures. You can look to the Hindus, the Egyptians, the Chinese, and we see examples of astrology in all of these cultures. Our study of astrology has its roots in ancient Babylonia. So about 4000 BC, in the fertile plains of the Middle East, the Sumerians were the first to study the sky and take note of it. They were the early shepherds and farmers. And in these plains without the mountains, they could really see the magnificent sky. They started observing those patterns and noticing the seasonal changes, noticing and documenting the eclipses, and started corresponding and relating what they were seeing with what was happening in their daily lives. In addition to the sun and the moon, they identified 5 planets that today we know as Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. With each of these planets, they associated different characteristics and traits and assigned a god to each one. By 2800 BC, the Babylonian astrology, the study and the practice of it, was really quite sophisticated. The Greeks came later to the study of astrology. It was around the 9th century BC, and they took over the Babylonian astrology. They assigned their own mythological gods and goddesses to the planets. Later, the Romans would then apply their own mythology and rename the planets. So our names for these planets are an English translation of the Latin translation, of the Greek translation, of the early Babylonian nomenclature. There you go. Now, for those of you who have taken my Greek goddess classes, I'm going to be making references to not only our names of these planets based on the Roman names, but I'm also going to make references to the Greek gods and goddesses. When you understand the mythology of them and you get to know those characteristics of those gods and goddesses, it helps to understand the nature of these planets. It really starts filling out the details. So that's great for those of you who've been students of mine. If you haven't, I think I'm sprinkling enough little details here that will fill in and give you a great introduction to these characters, this pantheon of planets. And if you're interested in learning more, or those of you who have taken it would love to do a masterclass and review any of these things with me, let me know. It's your interest that's going to be driving future videos coming forward. So I need to hear from you. Like and comment. Let me know in the comment section below. So I just want to insert that a little bit there. You can help drive and determine what are going to be the next videos that I produce. Okay, so now moving on to this next segment of the video, we're going to take a look at how the ancient astrologers associated the planets with the different signs. Because I got thinking, how did they come up with this? How is it that they associated, Mercury with Venus and Gemini? Well, I'm going to show you how. We're going to map it out in the Zodiac chart. We're going to look at the sky together in a chart format and show you how they assigned these planets to the different signs. It's cool stuff. All right, so before we take a look at that chart, let's get this setting in mind. All right, let's go back 4000 BC and imagine that we're in the fertile plains in the Middle East and we're looking up at the sky. When we draw this chart, we're going to, if you were to use the stencil to do this, we're going to shift the chart so that way we have a horizon line and then we have that vertical line which goes right up directly to the midheaven. And you see this chart is divided into 12 equal segments. And so this chart is what has been used to map out how those constellations are moving in the sky, or in fact how we're moving in relationship to those, because the stars are not moving, we are moving. But then there are these planets that are moving and they have their rotation. So this chart, we're going to begin with ourselves at the 6 o'clock position at the very bottom of the chart. And imagine that it is high summer. It is the heat of summer. And on the left side of that line is Cancer. And on the right is Leo. Now, since the sun is in full strength in the summer, and the sun plays such an important role in our life and livelihood, it's what provides us with light and nourishment. It's what provides us with what we need to grow our food. So the sun and the energy of the sun and the presence of the sun was the most important of all celestial bodies. They refer to it as a planet, but technically the sun is not a planet. We call it a celestial body, and hence the name of my stencils with the symbols. The sun was then associated with Leo, and the second most important luminary, planet to them, was the moon, for its close proximity and having a daily presence, a very strong and obvious presence in the daily life. So the moon was then associated with Cancer. Now it's time to pull out your journal and take some notes. For each planet and luminary, I summed up their quality or characteristic, their influence, in a single word or two. For the sun, it's about courage, and it is the strongest influence in your chart. It represents your personality, your ego, how you present yourself to the world. And it's befitting of Leo to be a fire sign, as it is ruled by the sun. In contrast, the moon rules Cancer, and that is a water sign. It's associated with being sensitive, intuitive, and it is the second strongest influence in your chart. It represents your inner world, your emotions, your instincts, your intuition, and your moods. Bringing our attention back to the zodiac chart, the zodiac sign to the left of Cancer is Gemini, and to the right of Leo is Virgo. And the planet that is associated with each of these is the planet closest to the sun, which is Mercury. Mercury is the god of communication, in the Greek myths known as Hermes. So the presence of Mercury in your chart indicates how you reflect on your thoughts, how you communicate, how you organize information. It rules Gemini and Virgo. Both of these signs are great communicators, but they communicate in different ways. So we not only say that a planet rules a sign, we may say it's native to that sign. So the characteristics of Mercury show up strong in those who have Gemini and Virgo. So for example, there's a distinction between the two of these. In Gemini, which is very chatty, great orator, excellent teacher, great in writing, be a great teacher. They communicate very easily like that. With Virgo, it shows up in also a great communicator, but the focus is more on organizing ideas and real clarity of thought in looking at systems and processes. There are a couple of things I want to point out about Mercury before we move on to the next planet. The glyph, you see that little, what looks like horns up at the top. It's very similar to what we see in Taurus. Those actually aren't horns. Let's take a look at what Mercury looks like, the god. You see the wings on the helmet as well as at the ankle. Mercury was the god who could travel between worlds. Okay, this is Hermes in the Greek mythology. He can easily travel between the heavens as well as the underworld and the earth. So Mercury is a messenger, being able to take messages and travel from one realm to the next. Not all gods can do that. They were often limited to their own domain. And we see an example of this god show up in contemporary terms in the FTD logo, the florist. The next two signs in the zodiac wheel are Taurus and Libra. And they're both ruled by Venus. So if we're looking at the planets from the sun, we have Mercury and then Venus. So we're working our way through all of the planets as the distance from them from the sun and associating them with each of the signs as we move through the chart. The planet Venus is seen early in the morning in the sky and in this sense gives birth to the day. She was therefore a feminine planet and associated with love and fertility. The Greeks know her as Aphrodite. Venus describes your love language and what you appreciate. She rules Taurus and Libra. Both of these signs, what's characteristic of them is being very sweet, very gentle, very kind, and both of them have a great appreciation for beauty. The next two zodiac signs that we come to are Aries and Scorpio, two very strong and intense signs, one a fire and one a water sign. And so it will come as no surprise that the ruling planet for those two strong signs is Mars, the god of war, known as Ares in Greek mythology. This red planet describes your assertiveness and points to your passions and what motivates you. We know Aries is that fire starter who initiates things. It's the first sign of the astrological year. And Scorpio is very intense, is about strong emotions, and takes that initiative with transforming things in one's life. The next two signs are Pisces and Sagittarius. They are ruled by the sign of Jupiter. In Greek mythology, Jupiter is known as Zeus, who is the god of the heavens. He's the god of the gods. He is the sky god. So if we think in terms of the sky and we look up at that expansiveness of that and all of the possibility, when we make references to, say, trees and they're branching out and reaching up to the sky, it's like, how are we going to grow and expand? It is a very uplifting sign. It's a sign of optimism and luck. Think of the bluebird skies. We associate that with happiness and joy. Jupiter, where it shows up in your chart, indicates where and how you are lucky, where abundance comes easily for you. It indicates growth and risk expansion. It rules, as I said, Sagittarius and Pisces. How lucky for them. And the next two signs in our zodiac wheel is Aquarius and Capricorn. They are ruled by Saturn. Saturn's a very large sign, second to Jupiter, with its rings. In Greek mythology, Saturn is known as Kronos, often thought of as Father Time. This is a very large planet with a very slow-moving path and cycle. When we think about that slow path, it can indicate in our lives things that take time to make happen, but it also comes around to truth-telling. So if you haven't been taking care of things in your life, whether it might be your finances, your career, your health, there will come a time Saturn will show up in the sky, will show up in your chart, and will force you to face the truths of what it is that needs your attention. It describes your lessons in this lifetime. The emphasis is on discipline, work ethic, restraint, structure, the things that you need to build your life. And so it's very natural we see it associated with Capricorn, which is that earth sign about building things step by step. And it is also, to the ancients, associated with Aquarius. And there were some other discoveries since the ancients identified the first 5 planets. And the 3 were Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, which, as you can see in this chart, where their little asterisks, little stars, indicate where those show up in the chart. The planet Uranus is about innovation, and it indicates your originality, innovation, life force, and rebellious nature. It also is where you may experience surprises. So look to see where it is in your chart. It's no surprise here that Uranus is associated with Aquarius because Aquarius is an innovative thinker. Your ones are always looking at, say, new technology and new ways of integrating ideas and applying knowledge. Neptune relates to your dreams, your subconscious, your imagination, your spirituality, and it rules Pisces. And the glyph looks like Neptune's trident, where Neptune is the god of the deep seas. It is a natural connection to have it rule Pisces. Pisces is a water sign that is the mystic, the dreamer, and highly imaginative and spiritual. Pluto is associated with transformation, your darker side and self, and where you will meet the most challenges in your life. Pluto is associated with control, power, death, and the afterlife, and naturally rules with Scorpio. We don't often see Earth, this symbol, in the zodiac charts, but if you were to place it on your chart, it would be located 180 degrees from your sun sign. It represents your dharma, your right path, and what you are to achieve. It's the balance of your inner mind and your outer material journey. And the last symbol that I included in the celestial body stencil is the symbol for Chiron. And Chiron refers to your gift. It's your biggest challenge, the biggest wounds that you've had in this lifetime, and how to heal them. Once you have done the work of healing this karmic wound, you then become the wounded healer. And it is often an indication of where your work lies. It's based on what it is that you've learned, and now you turn around and with the wisdom you've gained, what you bring to the world with that. Here we are at the end of video 5. There's one more video that I have planned in this series, and that is where we're going to take everything that we've learned about the zodiac signs and the planets, pull them together so you can create your own natal chart. Your own natal chart is your birth chart that is unique for you. And I'm going to show you how I use my stencils to create those custom charts. It's so much fun. I want to thank you for joining me. My name is Kathryn Costa. I'm from TrueNorthArts.com. It means the world to me that you are here. And know that I am here to be your instigator of soulful and creative living. Until the next video, goodbye everyone.